Thank you so much for that introduction, and welcome everyone to this session. I'm really excited to be sharing with you this piece of research on the CMO scorecard. And this is about understanding what advertising metrics we can use as marketers to really help to communicate useful outcomes, to really talk about how we improve our own performance in ways that the organization understands. And by the organization, I mean the type of job roles and principles that you would see on the board. So, how are you explaining what marketing is doing to help sales? How are you explaining what marketing is doing to help the finance department? How are you explaining what marketing is doing to help the HR department, the bodies that run around the building doing the actual work? Now, this influence is particularly important because as marketers, and you can see from other papers that we've written, there's a very good paper called Marketing to the CFO. There's another paper that we've just launched on 3 principles of finance in marketing. But all of this work that we're doing is trying to help build the business case for marketing within the organization. And by business case, I mean real business results. I recently just finished being on the expert judging panel for the IPA Effectiveness Awards in the UK. It's a global effectiveness award. And in particular, what we were looking at was the econometrics of how marketing is making a significant and provable impact on the business. And I think this is important because when we go asking for marketing budget, I don't want us anymore to be considered a cost center, which is, at the discretion of the finance director. We have a more important role in the business than that. As marketing, we're literally where growth will come from in the future, where opportunity comes from in the future, and where your customer is in the future. And if a business doesn't do that well, it risks its future. And so we are that important as marketers. And this scorecard was developed to help us optimize and communicate how we improve what we're doing and how we achieve the results that the business wants to see. And that comes from, I think, a challenge in B2B marketing in particular, which is that we're often very much focused on the short term. B2B marketing departments grew very much from the sales departments of our organizations, whereas in B2C, what we see is the marketing departments tended to grow a sales department. They started as marketing and sales were part of that. In B2B, we see something very different. And that dynamic means that often the marketing department is reporting to sales, and the number is judged on a very short-term basis. It's normally judged on around 3 months, the quarterly results that we're expected to help deliver on. Now, that's a huge challenge because in any period of time, you've probably only got about 5% of your buying audience in market actually actively buying. And so you're only communicating people who have a need state, they have an amount of sales that an amount of buying or a need state or a problem that they're trying to solve. But that's 5% of a total buying audience. That 5% have probably made their decision at this tipping point moment here, where they went from being an ordinary punter, an ordinary person going around doing their job, to becoming a buyer. And that moment, something happened in the organization. Someone might have broken something. A contract might have run out. But actually, this moment here, this tipping point moment, is when the decision is made who you're going to buy from. The rest of the purchasing period is evaluation of that decision, but the shortlisting happens on day one. Now, as brand marketers, what we're trying to do is influence that tipping point moment, influence our company being the number one company that is listed on day one when the evaluation starts, when the RFP goes out. If you're the company that is the first that's chosen, you're the most likely to be bought from by a significant proportion. We've got about 87% of purchase decisions going back to that day one list. But what's also really important is even when we look at very formalized buying structures in large organizations, RFPs are often written in the language of the website of the brand that was thought of first. The brand that to the customer defines the category. And that brand is a brand. It was foremost and already in the minds of that organization, the minds of the buying committee within that organization before the RFP was drawn up. And so the advantage, the commercial advantage of being the brand that is thought of first is evident in sales. It's evident in the actual capabilities of people to think of you in order to be able to buy from you. Now, as marketers, we need to be able to measure things that cause results, that cause effectiveness results. And so when we're looking at marketing inputs, we shouldn't be looking at the marketing inputs that show that marketing is nice, or that the marketing looked pretty, or even that the marketing was liked. It's slightly controversial. We should be looking at the marketing inputs that actually led to business outcomes. And this leads me to one of the most hilarious graphics that the B2B Institute has ever produced, the toilet roll of marketing. Here we go. Whoosh, through the little loo roll and out the other side, we get business outcomes. But marketing inputs have to relate to business outcomes. If we're measuring the stuff that doesn't matter, we don't matter. And so in order to be taken seriously, marketing needs to evaluate itself on the stuff that really makes a difference. So through that, we produced the CMO scorecard using our own data, because LinkedIn is at a really unique position to be able to see different stages of a buyer journey. We can see when they were served ads, but we can also see who they were over a really long period of time by their active CVs and their skills being uploaded onto LinkedIn. And people tend to, especially in buying as well as in marketing, they tend to keep their CV and their data their membership data very well updated on LinkedIn. But we also get to see lower down the funnel the sales and insights that come out of Sales Navigator. We're actually seeing the sales journey and the relationship that those customers have with your sales department, not just the relationship that you create with them through marketing. And that means that amongst our membership, it's now, I just think we've just eclipsed 1 billion members, that amongst that membership, we're able to cut that by category. We're able to cut that by vertical or industry. We're also able to cut that by things like job title across numerous industries. So we created the CMO scorecard. And as was previously pointed out, that means that we're able to sort of not just appeal to CMOs, but also cut our evaluation from creative, media, and outcomes. It's a useful way of remembering those 3 most important elements of how brand and marketing advertising works. And so in creative, what we're looking at is how effectively our creative drives attention and branding and linkage. How are we creating memories in the minds of our customers? In media, we're looking at effectiveness, evenness, and efficiency, and in particular, this ability to reach the category. And the proportion of the category that we're reaching, you can only sell to people who've heard of you. And creating opportunity by marketing is very much about how we prospect into our category, how often we prospect and reach into our category to first reach people and then remind them of our existence in competition with our competitors. And then in outcomes, what we're looking at is the effectiveness of our advertising versus those people who weren't exposed to our advertising. And that's another thing that we're able to do with our data. We're able to look at the same audience, the same target audience that was successfully reached with marketing activity versus those that weren't. Now in creative, we're cutting this one up by looking at attention and noticeability of the ads, the ability to create memories, branding, making sure those memories are attributed to the brand that's paying for the advertising, and linkage, that ability to link our brand to the motivations for buying. Now, in attention, we see some really interesting dynamics going on. And I actually think in a generation of AI users, we're going to see this writ even more large. Now, this example is from the data science category in America, but what we're looking at here is the attention. This is the number of seconds of dwell time that was achieved by an ad. And this is sort of evened out so that we don't include people going off with a cup of tea and not actively scrolling. This is looking at impressions against time frame. And then reach here is the number of impressions that we're invested in. So this is the number of people that were reached, and in particular, the level of investment that we see from the customer. So the traffic light system here kind of helps us work out from the red zone of where there's very, very little attention, but in some cases relatively high reach, and versus the number of executions that were good. They're green, they're getting very high attention, but the marketing investment wasn't behind those executions in order for them to reach a larger category audience. Now, in performance advertising, we have very diverse toolkits that try and cover lots and lots of reasons to buy. But in brand advertising, what we should be doing is picking very few messages, repeating them to reach as many people as possible, because the point of brand advertising is to prospect out into the category, into the marketplace, to make sure as many people as possible that are capable of buying from us are going to have heard of us. And so that's where we're able to identify these slow moving but flaming tortoises, these brilliantly creative ideas that currently are not really getting anywhere. And the idea is to put some roller skates and a jetpack on those tortoises, the little slow movers there that are creatively brilliant. And we want to help our customers to send those ones out into the world of reach to achieve memorable fame for our customers. And why we identify those is because if we know they're very high attention spots, we know that they can run at a lower frequency because they're more likely to be remembered. People are investing mental energy in watching them and engaging with them. And so we know there'll be greater efficiencies from them reaching, even at a very low frequency, out into the category. Now, the other research that we've been doing is with a company called Distinctive Bat, a group of researchers there, and we've been looking at what assets of a brand are recognized and well attributed to the brand. And what we can see here is that while some assets are extremely well attributed to the brands in the category, we also see that there's a lot of general category association going on, and even more so we can see quite large levels in some extent of misattribution. Now, these are some of the biggest, most famous brands in the world, and with the exception of a slightly weird logo from Dell, which they then never used again, all of the other assets are used constantly and should be creating high levels of fame. And yet, what we see is that many of these assets are fueling the category more than they are servicing the brand that they are linked to. Now, that doesn't mean the assets are wrong. It means that the level of investment behind those assets has not been enough for them, and the use of them, maybe in the prominence of them in the advertising, hasn't yet established them as the calling cards for the brand. But we've got high levels of asset recognition. That's a high level of opportunity from this for a lot of these brands. And if you can fix the misattribution and the category association and move those numbers into brand attribution, which takes time, it takes investment, but then every ad that you run is better attributed to you. Now, there's a warning shot here. The Ehrenberg Bass Institute and the research that we've done with them, what we've found is that the majority of sort of badly branded ads, when they are misattributed, are generally misattributed to the lead brand in the category, the most famous brand in the category. And that means that the people who win from badly branded ads are the category leaders. The other thing that we looked at is how are we programming our customers or your customers to remember the right things from the advertising, the things that are motivating, potentially those tipping point need states that mean that they're going to think of you when they come into a buying situation. And the key way of doing that is to just work out the ones and zeros that you're programming into the brains of those customers. What are the keywords and what's the keyword density? And what are you asking them to remember? And this is a kind of interesting one because a lot of the time as brand advertisers, people think that we're going to talk about causes. We're going to talk about things that sort of tug on the heartstrings, or positioning statements for the company. But actually, the role of brand advertising should be finding high levels of category association for people entering the category, so people coming into buy with a need state. And so we look at the category entry points, and we look at the linkage between these keywords to see if territory is being gained, if people are claiming association with the category entry points. So here, this brand from the cloud category that we did the research with, they have quite a low level of keyword density. They're talking about customer experience, learning, their brand, and then later data and content. Now, what I would be looking at is this versus the category competitors to understand who is starting to own what territory in their brand messaging. Now, in media, we have three criteria too. We're looking at effectiveness, we're looking at evenness, and we're looking at efficiency. A lot, in fact, I think we overbalance our emphasis on efficiency in media. I genuinely believe that in a lot of cases, a huge amount of commercial opportunity gets lost to this over importance given to efficiency. I would rather we look at effectiveness and our ability to convert into bigger deals or better deals rather than just the most efficient use of media. But one of the things that we look at in effectiveness is how well we are reaching out into the category. This is from the CRM category in Latin America. And what we're looking at here was the number of audience, or the size of audience that was reached at the level where people were making purchasing decisions. And here, you're reaching into the hundreds of thousands to be able to reach, to understand how over a year they were building their reach. Now, this is really, really important when you think about the objective of marketing to be growing in the category. You can't grow if you're not reaching new people. But it only works if you also understand what your competitors are doing too. So we always compare it against the weekly percentages of audience reached so that you can actually see where things were particularly aggressive, where that reach was achieved potentially at the sort of sacrifice of another business priority, and also where we can see that there are opportunities to find better efficiency in the buy. And then we also look at evenness. Our advice is always to spend evenly throughout the year because people forget evenly throughout the year. Our ability to remember is only helped by the number of times we're prompted or reminded of key information. And increasing reach and recency actually decreases our decay, our ability to forget or lose the sort of mental presence of a brand. And then as we look at the pyramid here, we can start to see where you can find some efficiency. And in particular, what we see is there's a balance between brand investment, which is often very cheap. It's reaching large numbers of people, which is a very efficient way of buying. It's also tends to include formats that return very well on investment, and content that is particularly sticky in the brain. It's often emotional content, which is much easier to remember. Versus in lead generation, where you're extremely hyper-targeted, you tend to know your customer audience. You've got a CRM list to inform what kind of businesses, or in fact, sometimes the specific businesses that they come from. And your objective is to achieve things like website visits. And there, what you're seeing is that the costs become much higher as you get closer to the competitiveness of being able to sell. And we often see things like search engine optimization down at that level, where you as a business are fighting or squabbling over the very last few customers who are making a decision. I often think of SEO as something very similar to the sort of bargain tub, or the very last basket of goodies that you pass, or cheap sort of products, cheap shampoo normally that you see in Lidl on your way out. It's the moment where you're catching the very, very last people who haven't made their decision. Whereas ideally, what you do is invest in brand at the top. It's much cheaper to invest in brand, but actually that means that you've already stolen the minds of those consumers. They are yours. They thought of your brand first. And so there is no SEO cost. They're branded searches, and you tend to have captured their preference for your brand from the beginning. Now, then that leads me to thinking about outcomes. We've made a great media investment. We've been able to prove a business case for the quality of the media investment that we've made and the objectives that we've had. We've made the creative as brilliant as possible. We've identified which pieces of our creative are the most efficient, that are going to get me the most results, that are also going to get us the customers thinking of all the right things. Now, in outcomes, what we're worrying about is where we can see marketing outcomes throughout the value that we're creating for the business. Now, in our latest paper, we looked at things like risk as a value, as our ability to impact on pricing, our ability to impact on the general perception of the value of the company, and our ability to get loans, for example, for the company. But in this instance, what we're looking at is really dashboarding against the increased likelihood of people to engage with us, to buy from us, or even to come and work for us, which is, I guess, it's a really interesting way of looking at the category, because we often hire from the same groups of people that we sell to. Then in hiring, we can also get a concept of how our brand is perceived within our category. So brand is a many-talented thing, whereas activation only delivers short-term sales. It's a very narrow-focused thing to be doing. What we see with brand is that it delivers short-term sales, long-term sales, this ability to influence pricing and raising our prices, which is an incredibly profitable activity to do. It gives us category optionality. Your brand advertising can talk about all of the different verticals, all of the different things that you do. And then it also helps with talent acquisition, and it creates these legal and competitive moats around your business where people can tell the difference. I can tell the difference between this brand and this brand because they think they know the difference. Now, across all of these areas that we're looking at, marketing, selling, and hiring, what we see is one of the biggest things to influence outcomes is reach. Everything is improved when you create more opportunities to win. And so reaching, this is an example from tech and finance companies, of those top companies, those that reached more people in every different measure also managed to succeed more. The other way of measuring this is to compare people exposed to the advertising previously versus those who have not had a message from you recently. And so we call the people exposed to advertising, and brand advertising in particular, warm customers, and the rest are cold customers who've not seen an ad from you for a long time. And what we see on marketing measures like click-through rates and lead gen completion rates is there's a significant improvement from those that have been warmed up. Like measuring this, continually reporting on this to your business, and even showing improvements in these things in the business. This comparison between those that have experienced the advertising and those that haven't is absolutely key. What we also know is that it really helps the sales department. We started by talking about how important it was to be able to show to the sales team and to gain the sort of confidence and the enthusiasm of our sales team that a difference had been made by marketing. And what we're seeing is this very big improvement in in-mail acceptance rates for sales teams, also lifts in connection requests for sales teams. Now, these are two things that may seem relatively modest, acceptance rates, connection requests. Surely we do that on LinkedIn every day. But these are huge areas of stress for sales team. The cold outreach element of their job is terrifying. It's personal and at the same time incredibly impersonal and a bit gross. And so if you're improving the outcomes here, where there is real pain in the sales team, you are providing a solution that is incredibly welcome. Now, the other thing is in hiring, and it's never a bad idea to be friends with your HR team, but it's an even better idea to be able to show not only the HR team, but also the finance team that warmed up members want to work for us, that people who have seen brand advertising are also more likely to respond or to engage with your hiring activities. This improves the quality of people coming into your company. It means you can start doing a wonderful thing called parity hiring, where people from one company want to go and do the same job at another company. That saves a huge amount of money, but it means that you get people who are incredibly capable, incredibly good. You're getting more CVs, you're getting a much better quality of applicant, and you're often getting faster hires because people really like those people more. You're also getting people coming into your company who are really excited and enthused to work for your brand, and that's an injection of real talent made by marketing. You're actually getting people who are excited to work for you. I've heard of that name. I want to work for those people. Brilliant. So across the CMO scorecard, what we're looking at is this brilliant ability to be able to measure, judge, evaluate our creative in a much more sort of scientific method that can be repeated across executions. In media, we're looking at this ability to reach better, more effectively, more evenly, and more efficiently. And then in outcomes, what we're looking at is showing that our advertising is impacting on real business outcomes. Now, we call this performance branding, and it's actually a data-driven, financially framed approach to brand that we've developed over the last 4.5 years that the B2B Institute has existed. And we now do this with hundreds of companies across LinkedIn. But the concept of performance branding is stealing from performance marketing, purist performance marketing, a level of rigor, a level of data, a level of speed of reporting, so that actually helps build a much stronger business case for branding and more discipline around branding within our own organizations. And I very much encourage you to think about what your performance branding strategy might be. We're looking at how we create memories and how we measure the memories that we're creating. You can use things like free polls on LinkedIn to be able to survey that. There's a level of psychologic to it where we're looking at really understanding the motivations of the customers and the people around them. What's the organizational psychologic around a B2B decision? We're also looking here at category targeting, understanding what the category is, as we've been saying in the deck before, and this discipline of linking to business outcomes, the econometrics that prove the value that's bringing the business to the client. So thank you so much for listening. I'm going to stop sharing my screen now so that we can see each other and have a chat. And I've run almost exactly to 30 minutes, which I'm very relieved about, so that Nadine and I can have a good old Q&A session with the rest of you. So I hope that was fun, and I can't wait to hear your questions.